You're listening to the Seahawks Insiders.
Geno looks, going to lay it up over the top. Got a man out there. It is Lockett. He has got it. Touchdown, Seahawks.
Getting you ready for Seahawks football every Sunday.
Hurts drops back, has time, loads up, throws. A.J. Brown, the defense. It's intercepted. Does he keep his feet in? He does. Seahawks ball.
Presented by Delta, the official airline of the Seahawks. Now, here's your host, Jen Mueller.
After what feels like an extended break, I guess you would really call it a mini-bye, the Seahawks are back on the road. They are back to work. They are ready to turn things around. John Boyle, do you feel rested? Do you feel like recuperated after that long weekend with 3 children in tow?
I was about to say, as rested as one can who was with 3 kids all weekend. Sure.
Okay.
But it was nice. You know, the family time is nice.
Right. Make sure that you get that in so that Lindsay and the kids know. Yes.
Exactly. No, it was fun.
It was good to spend family
Lots
time.
of fun family adventures.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I sat and looked at the water.
That's
I was
also
peacefully just watching the waves roll in, roll out.
Was there any wine?
There was some wine.
Oh,
there was
good.
some coffee. There was a deep dive on jellyfish after watching one get washed up on the beach. I can tell you all sorts of things, which then led me on a deep dive of SpongeBob SquarePants. And
Wow.
it was...
Where are we going with this, Jen?
It was something on a Saturday, man. Well, I didn't have any football to dive into.
All right.
I mean, I could have. I did watch some college football, but I
Okay.
wasn't like preparing for a Sunday game. So I had a lot of time to learn about a lot of things that were not football related.
All right.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Jellyfish actually can't swim very far, John.
I wouldn't think they just kind of float around.
Yeah, they float around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they can stay on the beach for apparently a long time based on what I observed before they get back in the water. Okay, look, here's the thing. We had a chance to recuperate and maybe rest up a little bit. So did the team. And I can tell after being around these guys for even just a day or two, it did a lot of good.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Just physically, sure. I think mentally it was just as important.
Yeah, talking to guys Monday and then especially yesterday when kind of full locker room, just you could tell guys just, even though, I mean, obviously the team's lost 3 in a row and that's not great, but you could tell the mood was such, like, guys were refreshed, as you said, getting a chance to get away from it. You know, we heard a couple players talk about that, a really good meeting on Monday to kind of get to the truth of what's been going on and how they're going to fix it. So I feel like despite the recent losses, the team's in a really good headspace right now.
Yeah, and I do think that those losses and that 3-3 record would feel different if you hadn't lost 3 in a row.
Oh, for sure.
Right? That makes a big difference, too. I am glad that you mentioned that team meeting on Monday. It was big for a couple of reasons. Number one, you did need to reset. Number two, it was a chance for Mike Macdonald to show how he was going to respond after this. And number three, according to DK Metcalf, what got said really needed to be said.
Monday was a very much needed team meeting where, you know, Mike just told us the truth of, you know, it's not anything the other teams are doing. We're just hurting ourselves. Penalties, you know, giving the ball away, not getting the ball on defense. So he just basically told us the truth, you know, of what we need to clean up, you know, moving forward. And, you know, we all took it, you know, the right way, and we're ready to finish the season.
And we heard similar, a few of us talked to Julian Love after, and he said that the phrase he used was, it's us against us right now. It's not, you know, he said, if we were seeing on film that, like, oh, this guy, I think the example, he's like, this guy can't cover in man coverage. Like, that's the personnel problem, you're in trouble. That's not what they're seeing. They're seeing, you know, a lot of self-inflicted stuff. They're, you know, they're learning a new scheme and mistakes are getting made that they feel like they can fix.
I was talking to a few of the offensive players on Wednesday about some of those penalties and procedure, because one of the things Mike Macdonald had said last week when we talked to him following the 49ers loss was just the way that they take the line of scrimmage, which I generally don't think about that as a thing. We did hear about that in the preseason, but in talking to guys like Noah Fant and Charles Cross, they said, look, if we are more intentional and if you take that line of scrimmage with just a little bit more command, now you position yourself so that you are not making those mental mistakes or not lacking that attention to detail, which has caused way too many penalties and called back way too many big plays.
51-yard touchdown last week because Kenneth Walker's feet weren't quite set.
Right. And, you know, the other thing that they also mentioned was, look, it's not an excuse. It is hard to be mentally on for 3 games in 11 days. Like, it's just hard to do that. So by function of having a couple extra days, I do think some of that gets cleaned up.
Yeah, and just having a normal week of practice. You know, as a couple guys pointed out, like they haven't had a full pad of practice since before the Lions game because you're short week coming off that game, short week for Thursday night. So that, guys needed a chance to just sort of get back in a normal routine, and they'll have that this week.
Yeah, in fact, I have not been able to figure out what day it is all week because it's a normal week and we haven't had one of those in a while.
It's Thursday, Jen. There, we solved your problem.
Thanks.
Hey,
You know what? Every time I have a question, I have a question.
Here to help.
That does not mean that they have not had their challenges and challenges that need to be fixed. Look, once again, they need to run the ball more on offense. They need to stop the run on defense. And you'd like for it to be an easy fix. I don't know that that is what Mike Macdonald is seeing.
The good news is there's a lot of good stuff. The bad news is there's a chunk of plays that are really bad, and the ball's getting out, and there's just way too many explosives. You can't play if you take those plays out game. It's just that's not reality. But it does kind of sober you up because it is less. It's not every play. So it's, hey, this is what's happening on these select group of plays, and let's go to work at it. Let's get it. Let's make it right.
Yeah, as Mike said, you can't just throw those out because when you look across the league at anyone's running numbers, like those are partly the result of big plays factored in the average. But to his point, like if you see 20 good run plays a game and 5 bad ones, those 5 bad ones really hurt you, but it's a little easier to address the problem versus like, hey, we're just getting gashed every play.
How much do you think it is just time on task with these guys together?
I think that's got to be a big part of it for 2 reasons. One, and we talked about this a little earlier, but it's like this is all new. And as much as we would have loved for the team to hit the ground running, start 3-0 and just play clean all year, that's probably not realistic when you have a new scheme, a new coaching staff, and a lot of new personnel. And then add to that how banged up they've been on defense. You haven't had the same group of guys together for pretty much the whole first half of the season now. So it's a little tougher to everybody be on the same page. A phrase Mike Macdonald loves to use is it takes all 11 guys to play good run defense, and you haven't had the same 11 guys.
Yeah, and while there is depth, and that is what we talk about every year in training camp, right? You can't have too many of those guys across the front. Can't have too many of those guys in the secondary because what you thought was just a, plethora of riches. Is that the phrase I'm looking for?
Sure, that works. Plethora.
Okay.
I like plethora.
Okay, we're going with that. You are now dealing with injuries at safety and corner.
Yeah.
And so you've got to have somebody step up. But to your point, right, like you are where you are on the depth chart for a reason. It does not mean that you cannot step up and level up your game. But it's hard if you're not playing with your group of people and if you're asking somebody who's further down on the depth chart to step into a larger role.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, you want everybody to be ready to go, and you have 53 guys on the team that you hope are ready to help you. And even if they are, even if that guy's going to come out and be great, at some point, there's going to be the adjustment of not just him getting used to being out there with those starters reps, but the guys around him getting used to that player.
Yep.
So,
well, and so much of it is communication in his defense, right? And it's not always the verbal communication. It's understanding what this look means, right? Or when I give you kind of this little nudge or nod, that's
you hear
what
that
we're doing
all the time. I mean, back when, if it was Cam and Earl or KJ and Bobby, you hear that if a guy goes down. Like, I played with this guy so long, I'm used to, like, if we see this look, I know what he's doing, he knows what I'm doing, and you don't even need to communicate it. Whereas if a new guy's out there, you need to make sure, like, hey, this is what we're doing because of this look.
Yeah. And this week, they really have to have that shored up because Atlanta's run game got going last week. Granted, against the Carolina Panthers, but their 2 running backs rushed for 200 yards, and they've got the advantage of familiarity with their scheme.
Well, they're 2 really good backs. Both have been running this scheme for multiple years, going back to when they're running a similar scheme there last year, the same O-line coach. Both see it really well. Both run it a little bit differently. One with a little bit more power. I think Robinson is one more of a one-cut guy, but both like the complement and the scheme go well hand in hand, and it's a tough play to stop. So, and it's not one of those things where it's just one guy. It's all 11 guys on it. We always say it in the run defense, but all 11 guys in order to stop wide zone.
I set him up for that. I said Mike Macdonald loves to say it's all 11 guys, and then he just said it's all 11 guys.
And then he backs you up. You weren't lying.
I didn't just make that up. Some of what I say on here, if you fact check, could be made up. No, I mean, look, to your point earlier, like Carolina's obviously had their struggles. You're also playing for head in a lot of that game. So those run numbers might be a little skewed, but Atlanta's also going to look at the Seahawks have struggled to stop the run. They've given up, 175 or more yards in 3 games this year, including 228 last week. So even though Atlanta feels like they have the firepower to throw the ball if they need to, they threw for over 500 yards a couple of weeks ago in that win over Tampa Bay. I'm sure we're going to see them come test the Seahawks run defense and see if it can hold up.
Yes. Yes, they will. Again, I do think that last week's numbers skewed what we're looking at in the run game and give Seattle a few extra days and some time to fix communication. I think that looks better. And I think on the other side of it is being able to get the run game going, because when you look at the comparisons between these teams, Atlanta's given up almost as many yards per game on the ground as Seattle is.
Yeah.
So there's a chance to get that going, which, John, would help, because in the last 3 games, Seattle has played from behind in all but 2 quarters.
Yeah. No, they
that
tried.
Is it.
Yeah. They tried, obviously they barely ran the ball the previous game, but they tried to run it last week, and they did. I think it was the first 3 or 4 possessions were run, pass, but eventually you get that far behind and kind of the script goes out the window. So I do think we'll see them try to get back to, getting Ken Walker involved, getting the run game involved for sure. And
when you have to pass, you are not facing the same type of line that you have faced the last 3 weeks. There have been some elite pass rushers and disruptors, and I know that they traded for Matthew Judon in August, and he has not been that spark that they were hoping for in Atlanta. In fact, I was trying to copy down some numbers, and I'm like, oh, his numbers look really good. And then I realized what I was looking at was his teammate right below him on the stat sheet, because he's not really flashed much at all.
I hope he doesn't now, because we're going to blame you for it, Jen, if this is his breakout game with the Falcons.
It's not going to be his breakout game. I think they're frustrated. Look, here is the thing with the Falcons, though. They have a true bend but don't break defense. And this is a Raheem Morris coach team, right? And this is part of what he is known for, right? We've seen many people come out of this tree and have this philosophy. They give you yards. It's just a matter of what you do with them.
And they're good on the back end, so they're not going to be easy to throw against, even though the pass rush has not been there. I mean, 5 sacks least in the league, but that doesn't. You look at that and you look at the run numbers, you might think this is a terrible defense, but like points and total yards, they're not. They're kind of middle of the pack because they're doing some things well.
That's right, but they do have a couple of injuries that they're dealing with on the back end. Both of their safeties are hurt. Justin Simmons has a hamstring. Micah Abernathy has a knee injury, so I'm not really sure what they're looking at for Sunday, but they've got some injuries there. You mentioned pass rush isn't there. You know what? It's going to be challenging for Seattle to dial up its pass rush this week as we flip this around just a little bit. Kirk Cousins, we talk about the reinvention that's happening in Minnesota. How about Kirk Cousins in some ways reinventing himself with Atlanta and what he's been able to do?
Well, they do a great job of staying on schedule. There's not many third downs in the breakdown. I think, they're averaging, it feels like 6 or 7 third downs a game. So you need to win first down, and it's not like they're just running every first down. There's runs, actions. They got a good tempo package. They do a great job. So you got to be able to knock out the runs they're presenting you on early downs and then forcing them into passing situations. And again, we've said, hey, the passing stats on offense is complementary to how we're playing on defense. It's the same way. If we can get off to a fast start and take the lead, and if you have the lead in the second half, then they're forced into passing situations as well. So it's kind of a team approach.
I also like it. It just seems like he's really been embraced there, and he's embraced the whole city and the team. Like it's kind of an interesting fit. You bring this guy in late in his career in free agency, but it's early still. But it seems to be going well as he gets healthy. He's coming off that Achilles injury, but yeah, I mean there's a lot to like about his game and about, again, going back to their run game. They've got the ability to be pretty balanced and attack you different ways.
Mike McDonald mentioned the third downs. In fact, 64 third downs for Atlanta this year. That is tied with the 6th fewest. Now, you can look at that one of 2 ways. You can say, well, they're not staying on the field very much. There's a whole bunch of things. They're one of the best offensive teams in terms of total yards.
Yeah.
So they are getting those yards, as Mike McDonald said,
third down altogether,
without even getting to third down on that one. Yeah, so I think that certainly plays a factor.
Yeah, no, this offense will test you for sure.
And that offensive line, that's been pretty good because Kirk Cousins has only been sacked 10 times this season. That's among the league lowest, and he's still completing 66% of his passes. So Yeah, kind of funny. He was a little bit vilified, I think, in Minnesota. Now he's a hero. And
He's swag surfing out there.
He's what?
Swag surfing.
What is that?
I'm not going to try to describe it, but it's an Atlanta thing. Some dancing after the game that they do.
Oh.
It's not just an Atlanta thing. It's an old song. Help me out, NASA. Early 2000s, mid 2000s?
Yeah, I would say mid to late 2000s.
Okay.
Lil Wayne.
Oh.
Yeah. The fans do it after the game.
Okay. Well, apparently I need to study up on this because now I feel like I am far too old or not hip or I don't know what's happening right here. I'd like to change the subject. Can I please change the subject? Can I please bring in our fantasy insider, Scott Engel, to save me from this conversation and tell you what you need to know for your fantasy lineup this week?
Thanks, Jen and John. And we get ready for week 7 in fantasy football. We helped you find the lineup options and the streamers that you need. We started running back J.K. Dobbins of the Chargers, 25 carries last week. Gets a good matchup with the Arizona Cardinals in NFL Week 7. Also, Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals, 4 touchdowns from scrimmage in his last 3 games. At wide receiver, let's go with the rookies. How about that? Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars in that Sunday morning game against the New England Patriots. Good matchup. We saw what DK Metcalf did against the Patriots earlier this season. Also, Xavier Legette of the Carolina Panthers. 2 touchdowns in his last 3 games. Good matchup against the Washington Commanders. At quarterback, it'll be an exciting game between the Lions and the Vikings. Sam Darnold is a good streamer from Minnesota. Should be good for at least 2 touchdown passes. And at tight end from the Seahawks, Noah Fant. In 2 of his last 4 games, 6+ catches and 60+ yards. If you need a tight end streamer, go with Noah Fant of the Seahawks. Check out more of my work, more lineup options at Seahawks.com, the news tab, Fantasy Insider, also rotoballer.com and The Athletic. Back to you, Jen and John, for Seahawks Falcons Week 7.
All right, thank you, Scott. I think that was a nice little break in the action.
Sure.
That was a nice break. I don't like to look at the schedule and make predictions, but given how things are playing out in the NFL, now that we are more than a quarter of the way through the season, do you consider this week's game a must-win?
I hate doing the must-win thing because then it's like, okay.
And I love putting you on the spot for that.
Because, look, they're all important. It's cliche to say, but like if the Seahawks do go to Atlanta and lose and you say it's a must-win, are we giving up on the season after 7 games? Like, no. They're going to be 3-4 if that happens. Obviously, you don't want it to happen, but yeah, the schedule gets tough. Buffalo's good. Rams are always a headache. There's a lot of tough games in there, but trying to look ahead at the NFL and predict things, teams change, injuries happen. I think you just got to go out and get ready for this one. But to call it must-win, I think you just put yourself in a bad situation if things don't go well of like, oh, no, we lost the must-win game. Season's over.
Yes. No. I would say I totally agree with that because, right, you don't just decide that you're not playing the rest of the games and go home. Losing 4 in a row, again, feels different.
Yeah, for sure.
That becomes difficult. I do think it is a critical juncture. And maybe more than wins and losses, because if you take this down to the basics and you go back to something that you said before, this is a new system. Mm-hmm. They are all learning, right? This is still part of an install. As long as you show progress and feel confident moving forward, I think that there's ways to get wins in the game, regardless of what the final score is. Mm-hmm. But I do think you need to start seeing some of those steps and seeing a turnaround from what we've seen the last 3 games.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you need to see the progress in the run defense, especially. You need to see the offense stop turning the ball over. See, actually -6 in the turnover differential now. That's not how you win games. So there are things that, for sure, win or lose, you want to see improvement, and those are 2 areas that are big.
We did not even mention the fact that, it's going to be tough to get the ball out.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of those points of emphasis. But, tough to get the ball out given how they're playing on offense.
Yeah.
Maybe that will factor into the 2 things that you need to tell me related to a Seahawks win. I'm going to buy you just a little bit of time as we get a word from our presenting sponsor.
Statistically, the world is losing color. Just consider all-white kitchens, beige baby nurseries, a sea of gray cars. But in the hundreds of destinations Delta flies to, you can rediscover color in the bright blue waters of Hawaii, the emerald green hills of Scotland, the berry pink cherry blossoms of Tokyo, and so much more. Sometimes opening your world is all it takes to open your mind, which is why when you fly Delta, your potential takes off when you do. Delta, official airline of the Seattle Seahawks.
Okay, John, I bought you a little bit of time.
Appreciate it.
What do you need? Of course, he didn't need it. He's giving me this look like I didn't need it.
It gave me a little time to refine my thoughts. I appreciate it.
Refine your thoughts.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Offensively, just get out of your own way. I think this offense can be really good if I'm going to say don't turn the ball over and, let's minimize, if not get rid of the procedure penalties. Like you're going to have an occasional hold if you get beat. You're going to, penalties happen, but stop with the false starts, the illegal motion, the pre-snap stuff. Defensively, I want to see him be really good on first and second down. We talked about the Falcons don't have a lot of third downs. We've also talked about the lack of takeaways, and two ways to change both those things. Be good first and second down, whether it's run or pass, and put them in those third and medium, third and longs where you can dial up the pass rush. You can get some blitzes going. You can do some more exotic things to, A, just help your defense get off the field, but B, create some of those opportunities for turnovers because it's a lot harder to turn the ball over if you're not affecting the quarterback.
Exactly. I was going to say just minimize penalties altogether.
Yeah.
Yes, we've seen a lot of the procedure ones, but they are among the most penalized teams in the league. You cannot do that on the road. So I would piggyback on that one. I would also say I want to see 2 scores in the first half. And if I'm being real greedy, I want to see 2 scores in the first quarter because playing from ahead, especially when you have more than a 1-score lead, that changes things a lot because it's way too easy to say, I want Ken Walker to rush for 100 yards. Yeah, I'd like to, but you're going to have to play with a lead in order to do that. So getting points on your first 2 drives, I think will be critically important this week. And I want to see somebody step up on defense and have the game that we know they can have, just hasn't been highlighted on film yet. And maybe that's whoever's filling in for Rayshon Jenkins. Maybe it's, one of those guys across the D line that flashes differently. But there needs to be a big game. The one where you're like, he's the walk-off interview, he's the podium.
He's the guy we're talking about as defensive player of the week, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, let's have an NFC defensive player of the week.
Is there a belt for that? Do they get one of those?
I don't know.
Do we have a belt?
Not sure what all the
championship
belts are for.
cup,
There's a lot of them.
Belt, a necklace. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
We'll work on that. Until or while we do that, we'll just say goodbye. And we'll look forward to talking to you next week on another edition of Seahawks Insiders Podcast.